Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. It is Monday, October 3rd. We have kicked off Q4. I am your host, Q, coming to you yet again from my mother's basement. And I have one very important question that everyone wants to know, P, and that is today the day you are finally going to eat shoe leather?
Unfortunately, it is not. I have been doing multiple experiments. There's a lot you have to do in order to eat shoe leather. Man, there's like the rubber involved. You got to remove the existing coating. I posted on Twitter. I did, in fact, I realized that there's no way one can prepare, a shoe for anyone, let alone oneself, without the proper uniform. That's super important to me, following protocol. So I did procure a chef's, jacket and also a chef's hat. And I will be wearing that while cooking the shoe. And then we will be partaking in the unholy ritual later this week. We'll keep everyone posted. I know everybody is ready to see me give myself cancer, and I'm here for it because I promised I would.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to continue to echo everything I'm seeing in the chats and just say point blank to your face, boo, boo, you suck, boo.
I see only one person who's saying boo. That person's name is Q. No relation to you, I'm assuming. Is that correct?
No.
Okay, just checking. Just want to make sure.
Person.
Whoever this Q is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to disappoint. Look, this is a serious issue, and I maybe I'll put the hat on for you later.
The bare minimum you could do to make up for welching on this bet that was meant to be done months ago at this point. Like, I feel like I've had
decades, an eternity.
A lifetime. I took out more student loan debt, got another undergraduate degree, and managed to
all reasonable
raise a child all in the time that I waited for you to eat shoe leather. But I digress. We've got a jam-packed day in store.
Well, just to be clear, this is happening. I genuinely have talked to several people about how to extract all the toxic shit. I've got my little camp stove. I was like, can I cook this on a camp stove? The answer is no. I need to cook it for way longer. I've got some pressure cookers. It's a whole thing. It's definitely happening. Now, to be clear, I'm eating a piece of shoe leather, not an entire shoe, not an entire shoe collection, not an alligator, not a lizard, not a snake. These are things leather can be made out of. It's going to be good. Q, please continue. Who do we have joining us today after we finish, shitting on each other and talking about the news?
I should unmute myself. So we're going to be joined in a little bit by Ryan Gentry from Lightning Labs to talk everything about Lightning, because I know nothing about Lightning. So I'm really excited for that conversation. Of course, we're going to kick things off with news and notes in just a moment. But I also want to remind everyone, it is Monday. That means we're going to do a Bitcoin Magazine Pro Spaces over on the Twitter sphere with Dr. Jeff Ross, with Dylan LeClaire, with Sam Rule. That's going to kick off at 4 p.m. Eastern, right after the market closes. And we're going to remind you about this on the day of as well. But we're going to be doing that twice a week for you guys on Mondays and Thursdays. So add that to your calendar if you like hearing everything that Dr. Jeff, Dylan, and Sam have cooking up, because you're not going to want to miss that Spaces. But let's dive into it all. So we finished up Q3 on Friday, officially for the markets at least. And the U.S. stocks have posted their longest run of quarterly decline since the 2008 financial crisis. How many quarters in a row have we seen declines? 3. We are on pace for a very, very bad year in 2022. Is it a big deal that I don't want to say global economy, I don't even want to say domestic economy, but our domestic markets, at least the public markets, are mimicking and rhyming with the events that transpired amidst one of the worst global financial crises in recent memory? Probably not a good sign. Ultimately, look, those of us in Bitcoin have been pounding this drum. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, because what's going to happen in Q4 isn't really going to be the stock market participants, people who move the market, the institutional investors, they're not sitting there at their fancy steak lunch today, sitting there well, shoot, guys, we had Q1, Q2, and Q3 go down. We got to make sure Q4, that's not how this works. They're not going to just, Q4 has to go up because we went down 3 in a row. Guess what? if the Fed raises rates in about 7 weeks from now, if we continue to see just unemployment start to creep up, if we start to see inflation continue to transpire higher and higher, I got news for you guys. Q4 is going to be just as bad as the other 3 quarters of this year. I've been talking a lot about a story that wasn't meant to be talked about this much. I open it up to the two of you. I want to really reiterate something, that just because it says, oh, we went 3 bad in a row, it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, next quarter is going to be up. That's that gotcha. That's how they get you in roulette too. Fun fact.
I know that 2 quarters of decline, the traditional definition is a recession. So we've seen 3.
Whoa,
so I guess
whoa. Where'd you come up with that? That's fake news.
It was from not from the Ministry of Truth, but that was the traditional definition that I learned back in econ class back in college. But I guess what encapsulates a depression basically? Is that 4 quarters of decline, or is it unemployment at a certain rate? I forget what it is.
GDP.
Genuine question.
So the recession marker that you're talking about is GDP, and we did actually get a positive readout of expectations of Q3 GDP, which were already meant to be positive, but now are looking to be much more positive than originally anticipated. I mean, real GDP is going to come in negative, because once you start to factor in inflation, there's no way GDP is going to be 8% inflation, guys. Let's go. Inflation with another win. Woo.
Yeah, you can, however you want to spin it, it's bad news. Bad news, fucking bears.
A lot of pain this year, more pain to come. P, let's get a little bit less pain.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Lightning Network is an incredible innovation. We talk a lot about all the things that can be built on top of the Lightning Network, essentially almost layer 3 technologies. There are many things that you can sort of not mitigate, but you can instigate using Lightning. And one of those things that's pretty cool is using VPN technology, paying for VPN with Lightning, and then immediately getting access to it. We've got a really quick clip. Chris, can you roll the tape? If I talk terrible echo, but I'm going to do it anyway. Just to tell you, I'm going to talk.
Oh, I use that.
So, Chris, we can turn this off. We get it. So this is really cool, right? That was a very quick video. And of course, it was quick because we're using Lightning. And of course, the whole idea is that it's very fast, not Lightning specifically, but the process. What they did here is they went in, they requested an invoice, paid it, and then immediately had access to incredibly fast VPN. VPNs are extremely important because they allow you to protect your privacy and avoid censorship issues. I think this is really, really cool. And I think it doesn't get enough, it's not getting enough sort of traction in that Lightning allows you, and Lightning funded services that are kind of pay as you go, allow you to not have to dox yourself, to not have to use KYC or AML tools in order to very, very quickly get access to these critical pieces of technology that normally you have to go through a much, much larger process with. I'll give you another crazy example. I recently, I was traveling, when I had that different background, like the whole cotton candy background, I was in upstate New York. And the internet connection that I had access to was not fast enough for us to do this show. So I ended up having to go in, I won't say the name of the internet service provider, but I ended up having to use my iPad as a hotspot. And I had to give my social security number, I had to give my name, my legal name, I had to give my address, all this crazy shit just to get access to internet. Now, I hadn't used it before, or I used it for phones, but not internet. But I ended up just separately later going and using silent.link, which is an incredible tool. If you guys haven't experienced it, you can get an eSIM for your phone. You can get access to a phone. You can make calls, and they also have data connections. And basically, I am now using my iPad as a hotspot by paying as I go for extremely fast internet over the cell network, and it's all through Lightning. So there's an entire ecosystem that is developing and being built out through tools like Impervious, which is a company you guys can check out, that allow you to pay for these services that are traditionally kind of, I would say, almost like gatekept by, KYC. You can do that for free, or not for free, excuse me. You can do that for without having to KYC yourself, and you can get access to these tools. Check it out. It's really important. The Lightning Network enables these privacy enhancing technologies and access to the internet for people who don't have or don't want to dox themselves. And it's super important. So the future is bright, my friend. Use the tools, understand how to use them, because though you may not feel like you need them right now, there will come a time in the near future where you absolutely do, and you want to be able to use them. You want to understand how to use them ahead of time before you need them. That's it. That's all I got. I'm going to shift to the next story. There is a Bitcoin ETF that launched last week, and they are marketing it as a Bitcoin futures ETF. Now, they're saying that this is the MAXI ticker. They're saying the fund targets 100% exposure to Bitcoin by investing in the front month CME futures contract. They're saying income is generated by selling short-dated put or call spreads on the most liquid global equity indices. A sophisticated option writing algorithm dynamically selects option type, underlier, and strikes to generate attractive risk-adjusted returns, while a second level of risk controls help mitigate tail risks associated with option selling. And then they say excess cash is invested in short-dated treasuries, and they have an expense ratio of a high 0.97%. We're telling you all this because you need to be very, very wary of anything that claims to be Bitcoin and is in fact paper Bitcoin. This is a paper Bitcoin product. Hashtag not financial advice, blah, 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 blah. The point is, it's so much worse than some of the other things that we see in this regard, where it doesn't actually hold Bitcoin. And in this specific instance, it's even worse. You're taking on so much additional risk by trusting this company who puts this out, their algo, to effectively manage tail risk. We are in an extremely unusual macroeconomic environment, and these types of financial instruments are even riskier than usual in these types of environments. Do not trust someone else with your financial sovereignty. Buy Bitcoin, hold your own private keys, take custody of those private keys, and don't fuck around. What do you guys think?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. That actually leads into the next story if you want me to hit that one real quick.
Hit it.
Go for it.
Yeah, so this weekend, users of Coinbase, shortly followed by anyone that uses Prime Brokerage Trust or exchanges that link to Prime Brokerage Trust as their custodian, were having issues withdrawing their Bitcoin to their own wallets this weekend. So as we've been hitting the drum for a long time, not financial advice, but self-custody your own Bitcoin. You are at less risk in the sense of third-party risk when you do so. It seems that issue has been resolved, but for a good 8 hours, it seemed this weekend, Coinbase as well as Strike, Swan, anyone using a Prime Trust was having issues withdrawing their Bitcoin to their own wallets. Like I said, so, with things getting crazy with contagion risk in the markets, we were talking about, declining GDP growth, talking about, we don't know which way the stock market's going. We're heading into a recession. We're in one. We're in a depression, whatever it may be. This is when things, if those exchanges or banks or whatever collapse, and you can be at a point where you're not able to withdraw your Bitcoin. They show you on your account that it's in there, but you do not want to be in another situation like Mt. Gox, where you can't withdraw your Bitcoin, even though this company, quote unquote, promised you that they were buying Bitcoin on behalf of you. So learn self-custody. Even if you just want to start small in the beginning, start with a hot wallet. There is different risks or different trade-offs when you do that, and then upgrade to a hardware wallet in the future. But whatever you can do, withdraw your Bitcoin to your own wallet. Anything else you guys want to add?
You said Mt. Gox. Did you mean Celsius?
Well, I guess Mt. Gox, they weren't able to get their Bitcoin back either. But yes, Celsius, Voyager, a lot of those exchanges that, you're not able to withdraw your coins. I guess they're in the same boat as Mt. Gox right now.
Yeah, I mean, it is slightly different. Mt. Gox, basically, they got hacked. People who had their Bitcoin on the exchange had that Bitcoin stolen, and there's still proceedings. We talked about this, for months now, where basically Mt. Gox is like, you're about to get your Bitcoin, and everybody loses their shit, and they're like, it's going to be a huge, drop in the Bitcoin price, and it hasn't come to fruition yet. It's not going to come to fruition. Hopefully, those people will get made whole, but that is different from. Actually, I see what you're saying, Chris. It is essentially that you are still trusting these third-party entities to give you your Bitcoin when really all you own is an IOU.
Yeah. So one was a hack versus one is your account's locked up, exactly. They're going out of business and they're going to
exactly. Wait. Speaking of which, did we already talk about how fucking Machinsky just was like, I'm resigning?
Yeah.
We hit it briefly, but did you?
Okay, we did. Good.
The $10 million.
Yeah.
Q, talk about that real quick. This was breaking news this weekend.
I mean, it's literally exactly like I said. It turns out Alex Mashinsky, right before he was like, oh, we're a little fucked, guys, and we don't have your money. Turns out he withdrew $10 million from Celsius accounts. My guy, you are a sketchy, sleazy criminal. And I look forward to covering your court case with our new on-field, on-the-ground reporter, Mills.
Hell yes. God, yeah, these people, not your keys, not your coin. Take full custody of your own Bitcoin.
Yeah. I'm going to shift gears slightly, but October 1st was on Saturday, and that was the start of the 10th year of Ross Ulbricht being in jail. He was sentenced to an overly extensive sentence of 2 life sentences plus 40 years, 240 total years in prison for running an open marketplace where you can buy and sell anything using Bitcoin. On October 31st, Bitcoin Magazine, for anyone in the Nashville area, Bitcoin Magazine is opening an art gallery that will include a Ross Ulbricht exhibit featuring different pieces of art that he has created. The only thing else I want to say about this is Silk Road still exists. It's called Paxful. I'm just saying.
Sweet Jesus. All right.
Chris,
what else we got?
Make us laugh.
All right.
Or make us cry.
I'll make us laugh. So, Mr. Beast almost had 2 million Bitcoin stolen from him. And there's a quick
$2 million.
What?
$2 million.
$2 million.
Mr. Beast does not hold over 10% of all Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, that's a Freudian slip. $2 million worth of Bitcoin. So there's a funny clip of him explaining this story. So I'm going to play it real quick, and then we can talk about it.
But he also took my Bitcoin at the time too. But he's a fucking idiot. He didn't move. So I had a laptop like this, and right here was just written my private key. 'Cause I don't know, my fucking moron. It just said Bitcoin private key.
Come on,
so
Jimmy.
He steals my laptop, and I was like, I thought that's why my house got robbed. Like the second I saw that front door kicked in, I was like, oh, they just stole my Bitcoin. Because I also just recently tweeted about it, and it's like fuck. And I go in there, I can't find my laptop. I'm like, god damn it, they just stole everything I own. And then I just run over to my desktop, which they didn't steal, but my laptop. And I just I had it also a screenshot of it. I pulled my private key up there and I'm like crying. I'm like, fuck, it's not going to be there. It literally says Bitcoin private key on my laptop. He stole. And I'm like, they just took it. There was $2 million, which was every dollar to my name at that point. Cause I took a couple, $100,000 one month, put in Bitcoin skyrocketed. And then I was literally just about to sell it and fund a bunch of videos. And then that shit went down and I'm crying as I'm loading it up and my heart is pounding. I'm like, please, it's there. It's all there. And I moved it real quick. And that robber's a fucking moron. He's busy stealing my TV, my fucking blanket, instead of the fucking Bitcoin that was sitting right there. Fucking idiot. Fuck you.
That's the guy from the battle.
Yeah, honestly though, before we get into it, that is the worst way to store your private key passcode. Literally next to where you would access it. The second worst place, in my opinion, is on your Notes app or just anywhere that requires your cloud password that I'm sure you reuse 18 times for all the different things So like food for thought. As much as we like fuck around with how we describe it, the way P has described his multi-sig, where he has attached one to a cheetah, one to an is it alligator or eagle? One to an eagle, one to a cheetah, and what was the water? Dolphin.
A blue whale, actually.
Blue whale, sorry.
Largest mammal in history.
This is the
not
only
setup though. Now people
Yeah,
are going
fuck
to
you,
look for
man.
these animals.
Look, now I'm gonna get fucking attacked. The blue whale that I have, they're gonna track that shit down. It's got a little cold card around its neck. It's cute. It's in a watertight seal. I'm disappointed in you, Q.
Yeah, really dumb, but it just shows the resiliency of Bitcoin. That, I mean, he really should have lost his Bitcoin, to be honest. But it's cool that he had a duplicate of the private key, was able to sweep the funds and protect himself. You want to hit our marquee? Go ahead.
Well, I actually think, I think it, all joking aside, it is a really interesting moment, right? Because again, as you both said, this is an example of, if anyone controls your private keys, which are derived from your 12 or 24, word seed phrase, they have access to your Bitcoin. So wherever you store that, if somebody gets access to that, you're fucked. And what he just described in this story was his apartment, his house, whatever, was broken into. The person stole his laptop. They didn't realize that, if they did realize, they didn't act fast enough to sweep that Bitcoin. That is to say, to use his private keys, load it into another device or wallet, and then transfer that Bitcoin to another location. So he was able to realize what had happened, and then before they had a chance to basically get access to that Bitcoin and move it to a wallet that they controlled or an address that they controlled, he was able to sweep it himself and move it to an address that he controlled and that his private keys had not been compromised. And as you guys said, this is both a great story. It's a great outcome. He didn't lose his Bitcoin, but it does a really good job of kind of elucidating and really drawing attention to, you have to be thinking about your the security of your private keys and your 12 or 24 word seed phrase that is used to derive those private keys. So don't fuck it up, my friends.
The other way to really interpret this story also just, we're a news program. We have no bias. We cover both sides of the story. If you're a thief and you steal someone's laptop and it has their private key just like written on it, act quickly. Make sure you take
Jesus Christ. Q over here trying to be the fucking rebel. Like, I want to see it all burn. No, fuck that noise.
None of this is financial advice. Don't be an asshole. Let's talk about the title of today's episode. So I think, and I want to just share what I wanted to call the title of today's episode. Shout out my Rumble fam. Lock her up. What are we talking about? Kim Kardashian, it turns out, has the SEC knocking on her doors, as well as Kanye and pretty much everyone else. The SEC has ordered that an SEC order has found that Kim Kardashian failed to disclose that she was paid $250,000 to publish a post on her Instagram feed, according to promote Ethereum Max. Ethereum Max has other spokespeople, including what's that douchebag that came and talked at B21, Floyd Mayweather? Yeah. So Kim Kardashian has agreed to settle this case with the SEC, and she is paying $1.26 million in penalties. I mean, this is really, really interesting from the standpoint of, you are actually now seeing a celebrity, because this is the only example, correct if I'm wrong on that, where the SEC is taking legal action against any of these type of people who have promoted or used their platforms, social media platforms, to promote something that they are now deeming to be a security. We saw this shortly after the Bitcoin conference, all the list of all the different celebrities who've received some sort of payment or another to post about some token or some NFT on their page. This is only going to get ramped up, I think, over the course of the next few years. It'll be really interesting. And I want to borrow something that we kind of talked about during and throughout the Tornado Cash sanctions and issues. First and foremost, Bitcoin is not a security. It passes the Howey test in that regard. However, I think we would be a little too naive to just think, oh, if they're going after these securities, like they must think those are securities and the Bitcoin is like fine and dandy and we're good. And I think that's a little too naive and hopeful. I think we should be paying attention to how some of these things are handled, because while it may not be a direct attack like this towards Bitcoiners, do you really think Michael Saylor got a knock from the IRS just because? Like, no, of course not. So these types of attacks are going to happen, whether it's a direct attack to people like P and myself, because we talk about Bitcoin
wait.
on the stage,
I'm going to jump in here.
or it's far more notable people who change their entire business model, change the name of their business, and in turn are viewed at by a certain subset of investors as no longer having their best interest in mind. Like, this could be a precursor to a lot of other attacks that are not directly, oh, you're promoting a security, but it's, well, they're involved with Bitcoin, so we got to get them somehow, some way.
So I think you're conflating a couple issues here. There are strong incentives for celebrities to promote shitcoins. What happens is the people that produce those shitcoins, right? Bitcoin was a fair distribution. There was not a pre-mine. There are not people that are being airdropped Bitcoin in order to promote Bitcoin. The way these scams work, when we're talking about things like whatever fucking shitcoin you want, there's the rocks are littered with this kind of bullshit. And by littered with, I mean people crash and burn, where the people who produce that token reach out to these celebrities and they say, hey, you have incredible reach. If you say something stupid, it doesn't fucking matter, because your followers will trust you and they will buy the thing that you tell them to buy. So people like Kim Kardashian or others they're airdropped, they're given a huge chunk of these tokens, and then they're told, hey, now it's in your interest to pump the price of this. And it's total bullshit. So these people, they get on camera, they use their incredible reach to basically say, hey, I just found out about this brand new thing. It's really fucking cool. You should buy some. I bought some and it's good. And now I'm doing great. And then what happens is their followers go in, they buy this thing, they pump the price up artificially. And then those people who have been given those tokens or gotten them at an incredible discount, they then sell them. They dump on their unsuspecting followers. So I think it's so fucked up, and it's really important to completely disambiguate this from the Bitcoin space. When we are on this show, when you see popular people like Michael Saylor talking about Bitcoin, they are not getting a pre-mine. They're not being given these tokens at a huge discount. They have to buy Bitcoin just like everybody else. You have the opportunity to beat Michael Saylor at his own game and buy Bitcoin at a lower cost basis than he has currently purchased all his Bitcoin at. That is not the case when we're talking about all these shitcoins, and that's what's going on here, right? These people are using their influence to artificially inflate the price and then dumping on unsuspecting retail, and that is fucked. That's what it comes down to.
You're not wrong, and I agree with all you said. I just want to caveat, and I want to ask you right now, the only thing that has happened that we can fall back on to say, like, oh, they're not going to come after Bitcoin as a security, is because Gary Gensler has said Bitcoin is not a security. That's the only thing in the eyes of the government that has Bitcoin in a different category and class. Yes, there's no pre-mine. Yes, we don't get any Bitcoin. I would love a faucet. Holy shit, how much I would love a Bitcoin faucet right now. But if the only thing stopping the SEC from like trying to find ways to go after Bitcoiners is, well, Gary said it's not a security. That's a very quick, someone else comes into power, has a different stance, and then we'll go.
I don't think it's that simple, dude. I think that we are already seeing the attacks that are going to happen on Bitcoin. They are not from the financial sector in the same way, because Bitcoin does pass the Howey test, or it doesn't. However you want to say that, it's different from all this other shit. The attacks that we're seeing on Bitcoin are psyops. They're social. They're the whole ESG narrative. And we talk about it a lot on this show, but they're energy use based. Those are the types of attacks that we're going to see. They're KYC AML based. I think it's actually dangerous to suggest to people that that these types of attacks are going to roll over into the Bitcoin space, because I think it gives people a false sense of security. this stuff that seems benign right now, the fact that you are being, the government is putting incredible, vast amounts of effort into trying to get people to believe that Bitcoin is bad for the environment. Those are the types of attacks that we need to be really careful of, and we need to fight back. They're far more insidious than simply, pre-mines, token drops, and shit like that. I think it's important to make that distinction.
Okay. We're gonna keep chugging along because we have a couple more stories and we're running a little bit behind here. First, this story broke like while we were in prep for today's episode, but the United Nations, that group that's charged with trying to combat terrorism, and they've been very successful at doing that over the last, I don't know, maybe 24 hours. The UN called Papa Powell and other central bankers and asked them to halt interest rate increases. It has begun. This will be really interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, look, I didn't know the UN. I had to look it up. Like, what actually was the UN founded for? And it literally is a counterterrorism group.
Wait, really?
Yes. That's why I keep saying this. Like, I'm not just fucking.
Is it? I actually don't know. But to me, my understanding is that the UN is designed to promote international peace and harmony and unity.
So what is the one thing that takes away from international peace and harmony in the eyes of the
I think it's more than just terrorism, my friend. I think the UN was founded. Which fucking was it? World War II?
I'm staring at UN.org and it says 70 ways the UN makes a difference, and it's like making peace and security, consolidating peace.
Yeah, I think terrorism is one tiny facet of that. Again, I think by drilling in on that, you're obscuring their larger goals, which is like, we want everybody to have nothing and to be happy and to drink insect milk, that is.
Everything I'm seeing here just like goes back to terrorism, man. Like, they're just an anti-terrorist organization that for some reason feels like
terrorism is a boogeyman, though. Terrorism is the boogeyman that everybody throws out there, and like,
but that's the point I'm trying to make. Is like, this is this is a ridiculous international organization that has never once proven to be like, oh, these are like the financial leaders of the world, to now have any sort of say, voice, or opinion about how the global financial system is going to be run and operated is as ludicrous as the idea of forming this international coalition to fight, quote unquote, terrorism.
All right. Let's hit the next story, and then I want to pull Ryan in here because we got a lot to talk about.
Okay. We're going to talk Credit Suisse because this was going around, and Chris, I don't know if we have the chart that we can pull up, but if not, that's okay. The TLDR is this: the price to book ratio of Credit Suisse is starting to flash some really scary warning signs. There's been a lot of conversations for about the last week and a half to 2 weeks that, hey, Credit Suisse looks to be like at risk, akin to what we saw from banks like, or from just like any banking entity in the 2007-2008 financial crisis. I'm going to mispronounce, Alasdair MacLeod posted a very interesting chart, not chart, but an Excel little spreadsheet of different banks and their price to book ratios. And despite all the conversations we're seeing out there about Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank also has a lower price to book ratio and is really flashing a lot of warning signs that there could be some contagion risk. Now, we throw that word out a lot. For those who don't really understand or follow along, the TLDR on this is if Credit Suisse is holding a basket of bonds or whatever and is unable to make their bond payment, i.e. they default on their bond. But what happens when the next bank over is a bond holder of Credit Suisse's bond, and by not getting that payment and Credit Suisse defaulting on that payment, that bank or that entity now all of a sudden defaults, and it spirals one after another, all because Credit Suisse or the originating bank defaulted, and then their payments were not made to the next bondholder, and so on and so forth. And as a reminder, that's how stupid our financial systems are, that we're literally, it doesn't just stop at Credit Suisse. It's every bank, every private and public business that so much as touches Credit Suisse and has some sort of operation or tie-in with them is at risk of that portion of their business, that portion of their investment going belly up, and all of a sudden you're dealing with, well, what happens if this one department in Morgan Stanley goes out of business and all the other ones are still afloat? Well, you now have more strain on the business all of a sudden. This is going to be very interesting to see how everything pans out. We're not rooting for defaults. We're not rooting for the credit default swaps to go through the roof. We touched last week on the UK bond credit default swaps, just going straight vertical up. Credit Suisse credit default swaps, I believe, have also started to inch higher and higher, signaling that the market is expecting some sort of default to come out of that space. It's really uncomfortable that in 15 years, we continue to talk about different banking entities being overly levered, being intertwined so drastically that if one should collapse, they all will at least feel some net effect, if not all slowly begin to crumble and fall. Ultimately, I don't think we really learned our lessons from 2007, 2008, and time will tell how we will learn those lessons. Before we hit to a commercial break, I do want to remind everyone tickets for Bitcoin Amsterdam are on sale now. Bitcoin Amsterdam kicks off next week. Lock in those tickets now before ticket prices go up. They will be going up. Use promo code BMLive so that, the three of us can keep bringing you guys the news and having awesome conversations. We're going to cut to a commercial, and then we'll be back with Ryan Gentry.
You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Number one Bitcoin Magazine Live. You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Number one Bitcoin Magazine Live. Samba.
Thank you for sticking through those commercial breaks. I am excited to introduce our guest today. He is the head of business development over at Lightning Labs. Your Twitter bio through for a second, and a graduate of the University of Texas in Austin. Ryan, there's so much more that you can say about yourself, so I'm going to let you say more about yourself, but welcome Ryan Gentry to the show.
Hey, everybody. P's and Q's. What's going on?
We're keeping it real. We're keeping it
I
real.
love
Also,
it.
before you jump in, I just want to defend you. You're not the head of business development. You are the director of business development. You direct shit, and that's
I
substantial.
just develop business, man. That's it. We got a lot of really talented, actual developers writing code, and I just develop the business.
That Twitter
the
bio
word in
threw
front
me.
doesn't really matter.
I know. I'm just fucking with you. But
I appreciate
no,
it.
man, you are an incredible asset to the Bitcoin space. Obviously, you have been at Bitcoin, or excuse me, at Lightning Labs for a long time now. You also got an incredible sense of humor. I'm excited to jump in today and talk about kind of what Lightning Labs does, the new protocol, perhaps the wrong word, but Taro that you guys have been working on, what the implications for that are, and some of the controversy around that and what it might enable. Can you start by telling us, what Lightning Labs is, and maybe talking about the different Lightning implementations?
Yeah, for sure. So Thank you for the warm introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the invitation on the show. I'm excited to be here. For a little bit of brief history, our CEO, Elizabeth Stark, who, everybody should know, founded Lightning Labs in 2015, 2016, with our CTO, Lalo Osuntukun, also known as Roast Beef. The purpose of the company is to build the Lightning Network, right? To build out the open source software and developer tools to allow the Lightning Network to grow. So in the 5-6 years since, Lightning Labs builds LND, the Lightning Network daemon, which is the dominant implementation used on the network. Of course, the Lightning protocol is specified in the bolts, the basics of Lightning technology, and there are additional implementations. Blockstream has C Lightning, or I guess it's called Core Lightning now. Async has Eclair, and then the folks at Spiral have LDK, Lightning Developer Kit. But our implementation is LND. LND is, really battle tested, has a great developer ecosystem. We continually hear from people that are getting on board that, they don't even really need to reach out to us because our, developer community is so strong, has such great documentation, great tutorials, etc., which is, fantastic. So we build that and we help, get the Lightning Network up and running and keep it operating. We work with tons of companies all across the space, with running their nodes. And we also have, a couple of paid products that are focused on liquidity management. So we have Loop, which is the on and off ramp between on-chain Bitcoin and Lightning Bitcoin. And then we have Pool, which is a marketplace for buying and selling Lightning channels. We also have, Terminal, which is our UI, which both Loop and Pool live inside of. And then last week, we just launched the first open source code of Taro, which is incredibly exciting. The team is like over the moon to have it out into the ecosystem, out into the hands of developers, all around the Bitcoin world. We've seen a great reception thus far. And just for like a high level explainer of what Taro is, Taro stands for the Taproot Asset Representation Overlay. It's a new protocol that leverages Taproot, which was just soft forked in and activated in November. Leverages Taproot to allow for, an easy way to think about it if you've been around Bitcoin for a long time is that this is a Taproot native way of doing what Mastercoin and Counterparty did in 2013, where they were using up return to embed, off-chain messages and off-chain data into the blockchain, which allowed for these, new off-chain protocols to represent assets, other than Bitcoin, but still leveraging the security of the Bitcoin blockchain. So, what we're particularly excited about Taro for is, bringing stablecoins to the Lightning Network because, Taro is designed in such a way that while this first release was on-chain only, further releases down the road will focus on, native integration with the Lightning Network, allowing for, people all around the world to have the payments experience of Lightning, instant settlement, almost, negligible fees, but with their, preferred unit of account, the dollar, at least as a part of their experience in addition to Bitcoin. So, that's what we're really excited about. I think, on a more meta level, what we're really excited about is, this is new greenfield space for Bitcoin developers to play in, right? This is, brand new design space, really excited to kind of reinvigorate the spirit of permissionless innovation in the Bitcoin developer ecosystem. And, just this morning, I was going through all of, both the responses on Twitter, which has been so great, people testing out the code, hacking around, printing, billions and billions of fake euros on testnet, but then also all the like various, Slack channels and Telegram channels, et cetera, of all the chatter. And it's been, seems like our idea that developers were hungry for new stuff to play with and new stuff to build with was exactly on point because the enthusiasm has been really amazing. So yeah, that's Lightning Labs.
Very cool. And, I as one of the people who, got together and created PlebNet, which was just a bunch of us kind of were like, we want to learn about Lightning. You know, the most popular implementation of the Lightning protocol on PlebNet is through is LND. So I'm super excited. I have not played around with the new testnet release myself, but I'm very excited to. You know, you mentioned that, you know, do you say Taro or Taro?
Yeah, so I say Taro
Taro?
because I have a twang. It's supposed to be Taro. I have to remind myself of that. Just naturally, it comes out Taro, but it is supposed to be Taro.
I'll join you on the Taro train.
All right, thank you, sir.
Can I just ask a question and
Shoot.
forgive the ignorance of this a little bit, but we see this conversation about like everything that exists in the broader crypto space can eventually be built on top of Bitcoin should it actually need to be. I want to just point blank talk stable coins with you and just have this conversation of like, are they necessary within the Bitcoin ecosystem and why or why not?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one that, you know, really drove our decision to focus on Taro this year. So, you know, rewind whatever it was, 18 months ago or something to Bitcoin 2021, when, you know, we got the El Salvador Bitcoin legal tender law, you know, we got Jack Mallers' amazing presentation. You know, that kickstarted just this massive wave of emerging markets adoption of Lightning apps, Lightning wallets, everywhere from, you know, Brazil to Argentina to El Salvador, obviously, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, you know, Vietnam, like all around the world. And, you know, like a really, I think probably the coolest part of my job is that I get to work with, you know, Bitcoin entrepreneurs and Bitcoin developers all around the world who are all trying to, you know, get Lightning adopted. And so, you know, in discussing with them all of last year as they were, you know, getting hit with tons of new signups, tons of new adoption, you know, we're very excited, you know, as the year kind of started coming to a close, we kept hearing this repeated thing from these entrepreneurs in emerging markets that was like, okay, you know, like this has been the best year ever, huge adoption, numbers all up and to the right, and I have now successfully acquired all the Bitcoiners, right? Like in, you know, let's say Chiang Mai, Vietnam. It's like, okay, you know, Neutron Pay, we got all the Bitcoiners, we have acquired all of them. They're all using our app. It's amazing. This is great. The next tier of user that we're looking to acquire, like we got all the people who were bought in on Bitcoin, the asset. The next tier of user that we want to acquire, they want the dollar. And that was just something that we kept hearing from, you know, from, again, all around the world, from South America to Africa to Southeast Asia, was that there's this next group of user that we want to onboard into the Bitcoin ecosystem. But, you know, the using Bitcoin for everyday payments was just a little too much, and they really wanted to use the dollar. And I think you look at, you know, well, of course, being at Lightning Labs, like by definition, you're a Bitcoin maximalist. I think everybody on the team is, you know, extremely bullish Bitcoin. We wouldn't be building a payments protocol on top of Bitcoin if we weren't bullish on Bitcoin, the asset. But we just kept hearing from these real people out in the world, you know, trying to solve real users and trying to, you know, grow adoption of their apps, that they really needed the dollar. And I think that that's just one of those things where, you know, if we can provide the same Lightning experience, we can onboard more users to the Lightning network. We can help out all of the startups that are, you know, pushing Bitcoin infrastructure and, you know, bringing users in and, you know, trying to educate users on why Bitcoin is important. If we can give them this tool that allows them to reach, you know, the next, you know, say 50,000 users, 100,000 users, million users, I think that's an absolute win. I think that's a huge, huge boon to the ecosystem, and it's just following user demand, which I think is really important. And one side benefit of this that I think is, you know, not discussed very much is, you know, because Taro is running on Bitcoin Rails, because it requires, you know, a full Bitcoin node, because it requires, you know, a Lightning node as well. If we give the market what it wants in stable coins, we are getting the benefit as these new companies adopt of spreading Bitcoin infrastructure and spreading Bitcoin nodes and spreading Lightning nodes and Lightning channels into all these places that, you know, maybe they wouldn't necessarily adopt if it was just Bitcoin only. So I think that's like an underappreciated point, just the spread of Bitcoin infrastructure. Because if we're all right about what Bitcoin the asset is, then over time, demand for the dollar will decline anyways, and this Bitcoin infrastructure will be in place, ready for users to switch their demand from USD to BTC. And I think that's a moment that we're all really excited for, and really pushing for. But there's just this bridge step in the middle where we got to give the people what they want.
Interesting. Let's go through like functionally how this would work. So, as I understand it, there's this idea of sort of like a universe within when we talk about, being able to move assets over Lightning. Like, what does that mean? And is it the case that you have to have these specific channels that are just for each individual asset?
Yeah. So I'm going to table the universe stuff till the end of this because universes can be a little complicated. Let's just do like a really simple example. I issue some Ryan USD on the Bitcoin chain, right? That means I have a Bitcoin output already. I spend that output to a new pay to Taproot UTXO, and this new pay to Taproot UTXO, I talk about it like Taro assets or like UTXOs within UTXO, right? So I have created a new UTXO with my spend, and I have now filled this UTXO with Ryan USD, right? And so because this is a pay to Taproot output, by default, nobody else has to know, right? Miners can't see it. No other users need to know it. I'm the only person, all the knowledge is local to my node that I have filled this UTXO up with Ryan USD, right? If then I want to open a channel to you, Philip, what I do is, I have that pay to Taproot output. You will need, a Taro node. You'll need to understand the Taro protocol, but I will just, make another spend again, right? And spend my UTXO that's filled with Ryan USD into a channel between myself and you. Then we will have, both, because it is a Bitcoin UTXO, we will have, a base Bitcoin channel, which, could be something really small or it could be really big. It's kind of up to us. And we will also have a Taro channel, right? And so that Taro channel, between me and you, it acts exactly like normal Bitcoin channels do, where we can send back and forth between the two of us, potentially millions, billions of times and never need to touch the chain. And it'll act exactly like Lightning does today. And again, that will all be private. And one of the interesting things about Taro right now is that all Taro channels by default will be unannounced because the Lightning Gossip Network doesn't support Taproot outputs yet. So, again, this whole saga from minting to opening the channel to now transferring back and forth in the channel, the only people that needed to know about Ryan USD were myself and you, right? And nobody else even has the capability, unless we broadcast that information, to know that this asset has been issued or that the channel is open. Now, the cool thing is because of the way Taro is structured, I can actually send Taro US or Ryan USD to Phil, who then can convert it to Bitcoin and allow me to pay an invoice anywhere on the Lightning Network, right? Any specific invoice anywhere. My USD will travel to you, and then you will convert it to Bitcoin, and you will forward it across the network, just like it's a normal Bitcoin Lightning payment, which is, I think, pretty amazing, and is kind of like in building with the same philosophy and spirit of the internet, where we're putting a lot of intelligence and complexity at the edges, but leaving the core of the network really simple and Bitcoin only. Which is there's like, from the internet, there's kind of the old analogy of the dumb pipe, where the core of the internet stays really simple and all the complexity is added at the edges. Kind of that's exactly the same philosophy that we're shooting with here. So if I wanted to receive USD, Ryan USD, same sort of thing. My channel peer, Phil, you would receive a Bitcoin payment, you would convert it into Ryan USD, and then transfer that to me. And everything else works exactly like normal Lightning payments. So I'll stop there and see if there are questions.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense so far.
Okay, cool. So that's like the base case. Now, the universes come in if as an issuer or, generally as an issuer, I think there's the predominant, but anybody really, if you want to share information about an asset with the rest of the world, right? And so, the most important information that you can share that actually, needs a blockchain to prove it is provenance, right? Is your Genesis issuance. So, when a Bitcoin is, unlocked or minted or, its Genesis event is a Coinbase output, right? Which are special in the protocol. And you can always, when you're verifying that you've received an on-chain Bitcoin payment, what you're doing is you're actually tracing back the chain of signatures back to a Coinbase output and being like, oh yeah, okay, this Bitcoin is real because I traced it back to when it was minted by the Coinbase, and boom, I can validate that this is correct. With Taro, that's different because the Genesis event could be any pay to Taproot spend. So, the base case for Universe is just, think of it like a repository, some off-chain server that says, hey, everybody, the initial Ryan USD mint, the Genesis output was this output in this block. And whenever you receive a Ryan USD, you just need to trace it back through its on-chain spends back to this output. And you can verify that it was issued by me in this block. The only thing that you're verifying everything. You're not trusting me with this information. The only trust is like, maybe my server can go down, and then you wouldn't have that, easy access to what these Genesis outpoints were. But the universe stuff will be permissionless, so anybody can run one, right? That's kind of like, so when you think about the universes in the protocol, it's really just for making information public that is all kind of opt-in. And generally we think the information that people want made public is going to be this provenance issuance event, proving total supply, proving that allowing users to verify that the funds that they're receiving actually were minted by the entity they wanted to be minted by.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna ask some dumb questions here.
Yeah, please.
Can you so again, for the audience, when we talk about the Lightning Network, right, you have Bitcoin Core, which is like layer 1 Bitcoin, and that can be run on nodes. And then there are multiple what are called Lightning implementations. There's LND, there's Core Lightning, there's Eclair. People are working on Rust Lightning, and these are all implementations that use the same protocol, so they can all communicate together. So I can be running a Lightning node, that is to say, a Bitcoin Core node that is also running Lightning. That I could be running LND, Q could be running Core Lightning, Ryan could be running Eclair, and we could still route Lightning payments through all of our nodes interchangeably. And so, can you just sort of walk me through, Ryan, like what it might look like? You mentioned sort of like, I forget what you called it, like Ryan dollar or like, Ryan USD. How would it work? Oh, and then there's one other thing I'll just clarify for the audience, which is in the Lightning Network, you can have announced channels, which, as Ryan mentioned, are communicated through the gossip protocol. And that is valuable because it allows other people to route through those channels. So if a channel is, when you create a new channel in the Lightning Network, you can either make it announced, in which case other people are aware of its existence and can route through it, and they will choose to do so. Their node will choose to do so based on the economic feasibility of a specific route through the network. So when you send a Lightning payment, your node is basically kind of running all these calculations and trying to see like how can I get it from point A to point D in the most economically efficient, that is to say, cheapest way possible. Mm-hmm. It can't do that through an unannounced channel. So I think you just said this, Ryan, but can you, if you and I are, both running LND and we're both, using, Terra protocol. Is that the right term? We call it Terra protocol.
Yep.
Are we able to, like, how do other people send, Ryan bucks through the two of us? There's some magic there. You mentioned where like it gets converted into BTC and then.
So think about it this way. Just picture this example. I present an invoice. I create an invoice saying I want to receive Ryan USD. The way that, and I present it to Q, who wants to buy, like a sticker from me or whatever. the way that the information is communicated, that I have a private Taro channel between myself and you, Pete, right, is I will include, this is the same way that you include information about a private channel, any private channel today, unannounced channel today, is there's a point in the invoice called a hop hint where it says, hey, all you got to do is just get, 1,000 sats to P to this node, and then P knows how to get it to me, right? And that's all that you'll see. And so in that hop hint will be information about the private channel, and will also be information about the exchange rate, which we have negotiated, myself and you, right, as the other parts of the channel. So how that shows up to Q, who can pay this, Ryan USD invoice with just Bitcoin if he wants, or he can have Ryan USD or whatever. All it looks like to him is just a routing fee in the last hop, right? This conversion rate, right? It just looks like a routing fee into a hop hint, like he was paying any unannounced channel invoice, right? So, he sends the payment, and I think it's really easy to think about this when it's all Bitcoin up until the last hop. He sends a payment, it's normal Lightning payment, Bitcoin, 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 Bitcoin. It gets to you. We have pre-agreed that, the exchange rate for Bitcoin USD right now is whatever, 19,500, whatever the price is right now, which I'll point out, if you go and buy, a sticker from the Blockstream store or a gift card from Bitrefill or something like that, every time you do so, if it's quoted in USD, they quote you a price and say this price is good for 30 minutes or an hour or 10 minutes. There's always some quote with the price and some time delay. So we already deal with this problem, issue of conversion to Lightning Network today. But anyways, the sats get to your node, P. You have received some BTC. You then pay out USD at the agreed upon rate. You keep a little bit of USD for yourself as the routing / conversion fee. I receive USD. Everybody's happy. And importantly, none of the other nodes, except for ours two, need to understand anything about Taro, right? This is all just normal Lightning payments. It could go, between Rust Lightning to Eclair to C Lightning to LND, finally PDU with LND and Taro, because this is all just using the existing Bolt compatible Lightning mechanics. The only difference is this edge node at the end, this private channel that has Taro assets in it, and the hop hint that communicates which specific, how to get to the Taro enabled channel.
Got it. Okay.
Clear as mud. I see a lot of thinking.
No, I'm just sort of trying to go through it. I mean, that does make sense.
Okay.
Go ahead, Q. Oh, I thought you opened your mouth and you were going to say something. What have you experienced as the most common sort of concerns around Taro and what you guys are trying to do? What are some of the pieces of pushback, and then which ones do you feel are understandable? Which ones do you feel are kind of spurious?
It's a great question. I think there's been a really, really interesting dichotomy that I've noticed. Once we announced the protocol in April, right before Bitcoin 2022, where one, I want to be really clear and really explicit that this is the most. Our team took so many pains to make sure that this was the most Bitcoin friendly way and aligned with Bitcoin philosophy to introduce alternative assets to the Bitcoin chain as possible, right? So importantly, doesn't use op return. So you can run a full Bitcoin node, never run a Taro daemon, Taro will have absolutely no impact on you, right? You can ignore it entirely, just like how you can run a Bitcoin node today and not run a Lightning node, and Lightning has no impact on you at all. Taro is the exact same way, right? All of this information is committed within Bitcoin outputs. It's all local by default. There is no global broadcast, no additional burden on full node operators at all. It's all fully verifiable, and this is the lineage of Taro. I believe the earliest Bitcoin specific attempt at something like this was using Peter Todd's single-use seals, which I think was like 2014, 2015. Then kind of like the RGB project picked up Peter Todd's work 2019-ish, I believe. And I was a huge fan of the RGB team, followed them very closely. And then, we decided to build Taro, at the end of last year as kind of like another attempt at this goal of, committing off-chain data really efficiently and really, incentive compatibly within existing outputs. So, that's number one. And for that reason, because the engineering team, Roast Beef and his engineers did such a great job with the design, we haven't gotten much pushback at all, which has been fantastic about, any sort of incentive incompatibility in introducing these assets to the network, right? There may be like, some grumbles or things like that, but generally, pretty much everybody, it seems to be, is like, hey, this is permissionless innovation, right? You're building things the right way. You're making it to where it's opt-in by default. We'll see what happens, right? That's been the attitude of most of the naysayers. Another like really interesting dichotomy has been kind of how I started the conversation, which is almost, I can't think of anybody who is, in the market every day, trying to spread Lightning adoption, trying to get more users and make this, network, which is, admittedly a little complicated, making it, usable and understandable by your everyday user. I can't think of a single one of those people who, when we've discussed the idea, have been like, oh man, stablecoins are going to be huge, right? Everybody who's out in the market who is, attempting to onboard users recognizes immediately like, oh yeah, this is huge. This is going to make the biggest barrier to getting adoption is the Bitcoin thing, which, as we all know, it takes 3-5 touch points or something like that with Bitcoin until you really get it. There's a lot of people today who, need what the Lightning Network offers, but just haven't had those touch points with Bitcoin to really grok it yet. So, there's, certainly a subset of Bitcoiners that think that stablecoins are a waste of time. But I think that they are, firmly in the minority, especially, in relation to the people who are, out and pounding the pavement every day, trying to get users on board. So those would be kind of the two things. I think, does this tweak Bitcoin incentives and with the way the protocol has been designed? I think that's like firmly a no. And then, are stablecoins a waste of time? I understand the argument of wanting to focus on just Bitcoin, but like everything that the market is screaming at us is saying that there's huge demand for this, that it'll really help proliferate, adoption of Bitcoin infrastructure first and Bitcoin the asset later, down the road.
Yeah, you're talking about meeting people where they are and solving the real world needs they have, immediately, or the sense of immediacy that they have. I think another thing that's so interesting here is that this all, of course, is built on top of the sound money principles of Bitcoin. It's all built on top of layer one. So this all settles back to and can be settled back to Bitcoin whenever a person chooses to, correct?
Yep, 100%. And that's something that we're, like imagine you have a Lightning wallet where, it's one way I think about this is, Strike has built an incredible user experience, with holding dollars and spending over the Lightning Network, right? Now Strike uniquely does it in a way where I don't know the details of their operation, but I assume that they have some back office trading, operation, which I believe Jack Mallers has talked about publicly, where they're maintaining that, maintaining the spread, maintaining the peg, so to speak, ensuring that, Strike is not, necessarily overly exposed to Bitcoin price swings, because they're guaranteeing dollars to their users, but actually holding Bitcoin, right? That has been a really great user experience that has, gotten tons of press. They just raised $80 million or whatever, something like that, tons of success. And what we hope is that Taro, with these issued assets, will give every Lightning wallet that same experience. But instead of requiring this back-end trading operation, which requires a certain amount of sophistication, instead all you have to do is run open source software and asterisk trust the issuer. And so I think, giving the Strike experience to every Lightning wallet, and in addition, maybe even giving a more advanced experience, which is you can optionally switch between USD and BTC balances within your Lightning wallet with, almost zero friction, right? It's just a circular rebalance, basically, is one way to think about it, to go from USD to BTC. Like, I think that could be huge for adoption. And, one thing that I remember talking to, if you're familiar with Nicholas Berti at Galoy, built the Bitcoin Beach wallet, has done an amazing amount of work spreading Lightning adoption in the in emerging markets. I remember one of his like early pitch decks, probably like 2018 or something like that. He was talking about how Galoy was going to be for the dual currency American, right? The American who is, wants to save in BTC, but still needs USD for just kind of like everyday operations. And that's kind of how I think about Taro going forward. Is it allows these Lightning wallets, instead of just being for the market, which is Bitcoin only people, it allows them to just expand into a much bigger market of the Bitcoin only people and the people who are dual currency citizens who want to save in Bitcoin, but need some local fiat for everyday operations and aren't ready to totally go to zero on their fiat exposure. And so, I'm really optimistic about that. I think that opens up like a whole new user experience for our, Lightning developer ecosystem. And I can just tell you that like the startups that are building in this space are like over the moon and chomping at the bit to, get their hands on some Taro assets for their users.
Interesting. Do you feel like this is I've been following RGB, which you mentioned briefly, for a long time. I feel like, there's some really exciting stuff there, but I feel like it's been sort of like delayed. You probably can't be super blunt, but do you feel like this is like the RGB killer?
Not at all. No, really, I don't. I think in the early days, when I first got really excited about RGB, it was actually for the use case of like, oh shit, this is how we get Tether on Lightning. Like, huge. That's going to be enormous. I think the RGB project has, broadened their scope quite a bit. And, we saw some tweets, and I still loosely follow the project about how, they're trying to do, smart contracting stuff. They built their own Lightning node. It's just like a really big project. I think we're really focused on nailing the, stable coins on Lightning for our developer ecosystem use case. So, I think that although very similar foundationally in terms of, how the asset issuance part of the protocols work. And again, like both stemming from Peter Todd's single-use seals stuff. I think we're just really focused on Lightning integration with assets, and, they've expanded their scope quite a bit. There's plenty of room for, both attempts, and hopefully we can both learn from each other and share notes and grow the ecosystem together.
Interesting. So I've been grilling you about Taro, but I want to give Q an opportunity to ask some questions about sort of your specific relationship to Bitcoin and how you came to be involved. Q, you wanna throw some questions out there?
I mean, I always like sort of hearing and understanding, A, how did you come across Bitcoin, and B, what was your initial reaction? Because I think the majority of people's initial reactions have been, oh, what is this? And sort of ignore Bitcoin at first glance.
Yeah, I have I don't know. I think it's a little unique where I was. So I graduated from University of Texas in 2014 with an engineering degree. My first job was I was working at Intel as a controls engineer. So I was working in these, big semiconductor fabs, which have 24/7, 365 uptime. And I think the statistic was every minute of downtime cost the company like $10 million of revenue or something. Like it was something absurd like that. And so it was really important that our control systems were designed were mission critical, right? They couldn't go down. And so, that kind of like initial job exposed me to what does mission critical engineering look like, which I think really helped predispose me to Bitcoin. Fast forward to 2017, and I had upgraded to a slightly sexier sounding job where I was an IoT engineer working on Internet of Things prototypes for Intel. And so this was, we were thinking about, autonomous cars, streaming payments to, tolls or to map information, or, paying each other peer to peer on the highways to, pass along the left lane, and all this sort of like, machine to machine payment stuff, which I thought was really cool. But the more I thought about it and the more I looked at like the numbers, it was just like, man, there is no way that this machine to machine payments stuff is going to happen on Visa, MasterCard. Like there's just no way that we can do these small amounts, that we could do the immediacy of instant settlement, that even like as a company, we could register and get all of these devices like their own accounts on these centralized networks. Like it just seemed totally intractable. And so, that just so happened to coincide with the 2017, ICO boom. There was tons of stuff about digital currencies. It actually took me a little while to like sift through all the nonsense to figure out Bitcoin, because, initially I was just like, oh, what's going to be the micropayments, machine to machine payments network? That's the one I'm interested in working on. So, it took me a little while to actually sift through all of that stuff and, end up at Bitcoin. But what ended up really getting me was, my first job in the crypto space was I was actually the lead analyst at Multicoin Capital. So, not a very Bitcoin friendly shop. And, they asked me first to, research consensus algorithms and figure out, what was the consensus algorithm of the future. And so I, dove really deep into proof of work, dove really deep into proof of stake. And my answer was kind of the opposite of the one that they were hoping I would come up with. But my answer was like, oh man, proof of work is beautiful. Proof of work is elegant. Proof of work is ideal, especially in the way Bitcoin has implemented it. This is mission critical engineering. This reminds me of, designing control systems to work for the Intel fabs, right? This is like, not aesthetically pleasing in the, kind of finance sense where, they really like the capital efficiency of proof of stake, blah, 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 all that stuff, the faster block times. But this is really, really beautiful mission critical design and, engineering for something that can't go down. So I was like, hold on a second, there's something special about Bitcoin here when I dove into proof of work. And then it was, other 6 months after that, I was researching blockchain scalability and was diving into the predecessors to rollups, side chains, all that sort of stuff, and happened on Lightning. And again, was just like, oh, blown away. Like here's the micropayments, machine to machine payments network I've been looking for, right? They built it, and it's built on Bitcoin. It uses Satoshis. It has this, again, like this beautifully elegant, mission critical design where, I recognize the same philosophy and influence from Intel control systems. We're like, oh yeah, this thing is totally going to scale. It's totally going to work. And people are just sleeping on it. And so, I probably had that realization, middle of 2019, something like that. I went and, presented at the Lightning conference what I thought were cool investable opportunities in the Lightning space. Met, Elizabeth Stark and the team there, and basically begged Elizabeth for a job 6 months until she finally gave in and let me on board. So, I think it's a little bit of a unique path where, especially coming in from the crypto space, all you hear is like, Bitcoin is old, Bitcoin is Sputnik, Bitcoin never advances, blah, 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 blah. But, with a real mission critical engineering experience, you realize that's all kind of nonsense. And actually there's like real solid foundation here. And we just need to keep building on top of that foundation and, ensuring that the foundation stays strong.
I think that the thing I found most interesting in that conversation was just how surprised people were by your passion of proof of work. And just given, I think, where we are in the broader crypto space and the merge that, for the sake of our show, the merge happened, P, you're not welching on this fucking bet. But like, for the sake of like, let's be really honest with ourselves, there was a whole lot of nothing over there. For context also, Ryan, in case I assume you watch our show like religiously, as do most of our audience members as well as our guests.
Fair, yeah, it's a fair assumption.
But for any new audience members out there, the bet I am discussing here is P, the less handsome co-host. He bet saying that the merge would not happen, but if it did in the month of September, we caveated by the whole month, it just had to happen then, he would eat 2 whole shoes.
Oh my God.
But
no, this is bullshit. I'm putting my foot down. Not true. Lies. A piece of shoe leather. And it was, if this hard fork happens and was not like instant, immolation of everyone involved. And, they pulled off a thing. That's for sure. So now I have to eat some shoes. A piece of shoe.
That's very exciting.
Now that context is set, Ryan, I would love your thoughts on just, as you heard and witnessed this happen, how much eye rolling do you have to fight off when you hear some of the bullshit that gets spewed about why proof of stake is actually better than proof of work? Like, can you maybe touch on some of the examples in your own studies that you were like, this just doesn't make, why would we go and do this system versus proof of work, which offers us this?
Yeah. I mean, it's a category, more than anything else, it's a category error problem, right? Like, what the Bitcoin base layer is designed to do is to make it, really cheap to run, really accessible to run a full node, to validate all prior transactions, and to verify when you're receiving payments on chain. Again, like I talked about at the top of the call, that the coins that you're being sent are legit, right? That they're actual Bitcoins, they trace all the way back to a Coinbase, that they don't belong to anybody else, that you aren't being double spent. Right, like that is the design criteria for the base layer, is how can the minimum viable minimum viable hardware, Raspberry Pi, fully validate this chain and fully verify that the funds that you're being sent are actually yours, right? And all the proof of stake networks are, it's completely different. It's like, how do we build a blockchain that has high TPS and doesn't require energy expenditure, which is like, I don't really know why you would want to do that. I think you could just use a centralized database, unless you're trying for some regulatory arbitrage play. But the why do we have this thing in proof of work, is for really cheap full nodes. And then importantly, on the mining side, for a validator set, for a miner ecosystem that has some like natural barriers to centralization. And I think my favorite one about that is, because the natural resource you need to be a miner in Bitcoin is access to cheap energy. Cheap energy is globally distributed. There is no monopoly on hydropower. There is no monopoly on excess natural gas. There's not even a monopoly on solar and wind, although I'm not very bullish on those as energy sources for miners. So we have this, predetermined by the universe or God or whoever, global distribution of cheap energy, which ensures that, validators or miners, rather, are globally distributed. And it's this constant push, this constant operation where you have to be on your A game. If you're trying to consolidate market share in the mining ecosystem, you have to run a tight ship. You have to keep your ASICs, online. You have to be hiring engineers, and like it's a hard business to stay on top for a while. Whereas with proof of stake, of course, all you got to do is keep a server online and keep your coin staked, and you just keep compounding your ownership of the protocol. So I think it's more than anything else, it's that the problems that we're solving in Bitcoin with proof of work are just completely different from the problems that the rest of the ecosystem with the proof of stake chains are trying to solve. So I think it's just a category error, right? Like the Greenpeace stuff, like, we're going to get Bitcoin to switch over to proof of stake. It's like, No, we're not, because it doesn't solve the problems that we're looking to solve, right? We want geographic distribution and max decentralization of our miner ecosystem, and we want really, really cheap to operate fully validating full nodes. And you can't do either of those things with proof of stake, so it's just not even worth discussing.
So I won't make you discuss it anymore in that case.
I will say one other thing that I think is interesting, like with ETH moving over to proof of stake, is like proof of work. I think when significantly distributed, it produces commodities, right? Like Bitcoin is a commodity money, and like being in Texas, it has been hilarious over the last couple of years pitching Bitcoin to all my friends and family that are in oil and gas industry. And I no longer talk about Bitcoin as a store of value or as investment anymore to them. When I'm talking to oil and gas people, I just say, look, Bitcoin is just a commodity, like oil, like natural gas, and it's volatile. It goes up and down, but it's produced by these, producers, and they sell it on the open market. And then they're just kind of like, oh, so it's not supposed to be like stable like a currency. Like it's volatile. Like oil and gas is super volatile, right? It's a very cyclical industry. And they're like, oh, that's it? Well, shit, why didn't somebody tell me that a couple of years ago? Like I would have bought some, right? So I think that focus and like the commodity focus of Bitcoin is really special. And I think that all of these proof of stake chains, right, like they're turning their token into this, it's a pseudo equity, right? Like even if it's not deemed a security by the SEC, it looks, talks, and smells like, equity, like a security. And so I think that's just like again, like a categorical difference between proof of work and proof of stake, which if you look at, this is one of the things that, probably one of the great Bitcoin thinkers, Vijay Boyapati or Tor Demister or somebody like that, I remember first seeing it from is like, gold, $10 trillion, biggest equities on the planet, Apple, Facebook, et cetera, are like $1 trillion. So sticking with the commodity market is like, very bullish for Bitcoin, the asset, because the total market cap that it can achieve is by being a commodity money is just much, much, much higher than being one of these pseudo equities. And I think we're the only game in town for that. Right. So, good riddance, Ethereum. I think that was a huge mistake. And I think they'll come to regret it.
So I think there's something interesting both in what you described, the conversations with your family, as well as just what we're seeing in the state of Texas, for example, and then more broadly in the oil and gas industry, where that industry now, while it didn't necessarily care for or pay too much attention, you're seeing large industry players now find ways to incorporate Bitcoin and or Bitcoin mining into their business. I would just love to spend a moment speculating with you of like, what does that entail for the rest of this decade? Just domestically, where does the oil and gas industry and Bitcoin go?
Whatever you're thinking, I can tell you, you're not bullish enough. So like, probably once I was became like the Bitcoin guy in my friends and family, which was like probably 2-3 years ago, something like that. I'd go to weddings, various events, stuff like that, and have uncles, cousins, college friends kind of come up to me and like laugh about the Bitcoin price or whatever, just kind of, nothing serious, no like real interest, something like that. This summer, I went to one wedding in particular that just like blew me away, where I had like 3 different people come up to me as, like VPs of strategy or, directors of finance at, various oil and gas companies. 3 different people come up to me and be like, hey, any miners in Texas, like send them my way. We're interested. We're deploying now. We want to meet them. We want to start, like, we get it and we want in, and we can't meet enough people to try and like find the right fit. Right. So it's like, they're interested. They have gotten now over the period of like, why would I want to do this? And, there's career risk because, we don't want to go in all in on this Bitcoin thing if it's not going to work. That has all gone away. Now, like, they're hungry, they're ready, and they're just trying to find the right people to work with, and like the right contractual terms and stuff like that. And like, it's all over the state, right? The western part of the state, the Panhandle, where there's like a lot of wind and solar, and not great pipeline capacity. They're just like, hey, we're flaring gas. We don't want to be flaring gas. We would love to be, selling it on the open market, but we can't. And if you guys can pay us to get rid of this flaring problem, like, yes, when can you start? Right. And I remember one other thing that a really funny anecdote was, I was talking with some Chinese miners who had, they'd gotten kicked out of China and were coming over to Texas to try and figure out, how to set up shop. And I asked them, like, so, just, you could go anywhere all around the world. Like, why Texas? And this miner told me, he's like, man, Texas is the only place in the world where, I can show up, fresh off the plane from Beijing or something like that, drive, an hour out into the country to some good old boy's ranch and be like, okay, I need, 100 megawatts. And the good old boy's like, great. Can you start Tuesday? Right. Because, there isn't any of this. You don't have to submit for permits. You just got to show up. Right. Because the ERCOT is just like maximally deregulated as a grid. So, there's a lot of projects elsewhere around the world that are, hung up by red tape and are going to take 6-12 months to get going. But here in Texas, like, you just kind of show up, plug your machines in and get going. And so that's going to be a really, really cool convergence to see happening over the next several years that like not enough people are bullish about. And I think it's one of those things where, because these are, oil and gas is a massive, very old, very well-structured industry, right? Like, they're not going to move overnight into this stuff. It's going to take a little bit of time, but I think like the education period is kind of over by this point. I think we've done a really good job as an ecosystem on educating. And now it's we're moving into the deployment period, which I'm really excited about. And like, I saw, fact check me on this, but I saw a stat, like a couple months ago or something, that there were applications for 18 gigawatts of mining just in the state of Texas over the next several years, right? Which was like, that's like twice the hash power of the whole network or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So, we'll see how much actually gets deployed, but like, there's a lot of interest down here. And, we have the supply and the structure of the grid to be able to soak it up. So it's going to be a pretty interesting couple of years.
Now, is there a risk, just in your opinion, of an over concentration of the network hash rate, both just within the United States as a whole, or even more specifically within Texas?
Yeah, so that's a really, yes, but with some nuance in that, like, I know there's a lot of, not a lot of, but there's some angst about the amount of hash being owned by publicly traded miners. But one really interesting thing about the US, of course, is I think one of the things about the US that sets us apart is our respect for private property rights. I think that's one of the most important things that we have going for us. And so it's one thing if, there's some massive couple gigawatt site that's, very easily identifiable and owned by a publicly traded corporation, right? It's a totally other thing if there's ASICs deployed on some private rancher's land who, has a couple of oil wells and is mining on his private property. Right. In the former, with the publicly traded corporation, yeah, you could see some, coercion happening, maybe an attempt to, adjust mining for whatever reason. But in the latter, if the ASICs are on somebody's private property, like, what are you going to do? Good luck. Here down in Texas, we have a saying, it's, pretty widely understood, that's come and take it. And so I understand the concern there, and I think it's very rational. I think in practice, what we'll end up seeing is not enough consolidation for really anything disruptive to happen, and plenty of miners that end up just seeking the plenty of hash that ends up seeking kind of the easy way of deploying on private property and not dealing with that headache to begin with. And in addition, right, like I do think because we have, the best energy markets in the world, Texas and the US, will soak up a lot of hash, but there's, at some point when the demand gets too high on these grids, they're going to start, bringing prices up. And that's when hash will go to, hydropower in Paraguay or, natural gas in, anywhere else in the world, right? There's plenty of energy globally distributed. And the whole game with mining is, can you get the lowest OPEX? So I think that there's plenty of incentives to distribute globally. I'm not really all that worried about it.
So what's other pieces of misunderstood FUD? I want to phrase it like that, where there is some concern, there are conversations happening, but in your opinion, this isn't actually something to really concern ourselves with.
I mean, I think I'm of course like a mega Bitcoin bull. I think kind of most pieces of FUD are misunderstood. So I don't know. Can you give me some examples of FUD that you're concerned about, or your listeners, viewers are concerned about?
I'll share a new piece of what I've been labeled as a FUD spreader by raising this concern, but like I've just come to a point where I don't really understand why we both celebrate things like Michael Saylor just bought more Bitcoin, so he has an even larger share of the total Bitcoin available, or any multi-billion-dollar or even some trillion-dollar businesses turning around and us waiting by bated breath for Elon Musk to once again say, all right, you can give me Bitcoin for Tesla, or Apple to say you can buy the new iPhone with Bitcoin. Like, personally, I don't feel like these events actually are pushing the needle forward in the right way, where Bitcoin is just going to then get held up by the people who have the most money that have created all the problems we now see today. Am I spreading FUD?
That's a really good one, actually. And it's one that we identify with. So, I write can I shill on this show? Is that okay?
Please. What's the point of coming if you can't shill?
Okay. So I write our monthly newsletter, lightninglabs.substack.com. And, sometime last year, I think in the spring of last year, our memer in chief, Elizabeth Stark, CEO, came up with the meme that, Bitcoin is for the billions, not for the billionaires, right? Like, the reason why we're here is not so, Michael Saylor can buy himself a new yacht, et cetera, et cetera. It's so, the people who are frozen out of the financial system and can't access savings to protect themselves from monetary debasement, people in Argentina, Brazil, Nigeria, et cetera, that they can access Bitcoin. So that's actually one that, I fully agree with you on I think the importance of Michael Saylor and the big billionaires, publicly buying Bitcoin is that it's marketing. It de-risks this thing in some people's eyes. It makes it, seem more acceptable rather than something that just, criminals and drug dealers use. But really, it's like I agree that the importance is overstated. The important thing, the thing that really drives Bitcoin price higher is, individuals holding their own keys, removing, like Unchained Capital here in Austin says, draining the exchanges, right? Using Bitcoin on a daily basis by transacting over Lightning or running a routing node, right? That's actually what impacts Bitcoin's network effect, right? And I think, as a company, Lightning Labs puts a really high emphasis and a really strong priority on network effects specifically, right? We like to say we're a network effects business building a network effects protocol on top of a network effects asset, right? Where, and just for your audience, for context, a network effect is, each individual user of a protocol in a network effects protocol makes the value of the network increase by the square of the number of people. So, if you and I have a telephone, that's like kind of useful. But if our 5 other friends have telephones, then all of us can call each other. And now it's exponentially more useful, right? And so that's, again, where, Bitcoin owned by the 100,000 Bitcoin owned by Michael Saylor are great from a marketing perspective, but from like a real utility perspective, it's the 100,000 Bitcoin that have been scooped up by millions of people all around the world that are really going to drive us forward. So, I think I generally agree with you to address the FUD aspect of that, right? There's not really all that much they can actually do. Unlike proof of stake, owning more coins does not increase your influence in the protocol, right? It doesn't, like, you still, if you want to force a hard fork or something like that, you still have to go and convince all the node operators and all the miners to adjust their software to what you want it to be. And I think that's a really important distinction, again, about proof of work, is that, no matter how many coins you own, you're still just another peer on the network.
Can I ask some more? I have a few more questions on the sort of technical side of things.
Sure.
I've heard a rumor that you guys are working on support for Bolt 12, Rusty Russell's Bolt spec. Is that something you can speak to? I'm super excited about Bolt 12. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a good question. One of the things that is interesting about the Lightning protocol development is, again, like, everything is based on the bolts, the basis of Lightning technology specs, of which Bolt 12 is like a new proposed addition. All invoices right now are Bolt 11, which was the previous invoice spec that was designed by Rusty Russell from Blockstream and team. And now he's designed an upgrade in his mind called Bolt 12, and C Lightning has deployed their version of it. I know that Eclair and Rust Lightning are also working on interoperable implementations, which is great. This year, Lightning Labs decided to focus on Taproot channels instead. Taproot channels as an enabler for Taro, of course, but also Taproot channels just because, we have this new tool set and people have been excited about the benefits of Taproot Lightning for forever, right? PTLCs, point time lock contracts, help improve privacy, help improve programmability over HTLCs, hash time lock contracts, which are only really enabled with Taproot. There's a lot of really interesting things we can do with the new multi-sig capabilities like MUSIG 2 with Taproot. Make a lot smaller channels. We can improve privacy of the network with making every channel a pay to Taproot output. There's a lot of stuff that we can do, and so I think we kind of diverged on paths a little bit with the rest of the ecosystem by prioritizing Taproot. And importantly, we have up already a proposal to the bolts, to the spec, for how to design Taproot channels. And so I want to emphasize, although we did kind of go separate directions, the great thing about this to the Lightning ecosystem is that we can do this stuff in parallel, right? Because Lightning is not a consensus network, we can have teams working on different things in parallel instead of everybody working, in serialized fashion, one after the other. And the whole ecosystem benefits, right? So we will have learned a lot about deploying Taproot channels this year. We will have contributed it all to the spec. And when the other implementations are ready to, change focuses or, prioritize Taproot channels, we'll have done a lot of the heavy lifting for them, and they can implement alongside our spec. So that's kind of, thing number one. To address, your direct question, like when Bolt 12, right? One of the things about LND that's it's been really cool this year as we're going through Taproot development is, LND's been around for a while and been really heavily used and, has an ecosystem of people that depend on us. And so like one, inside baseball thing is that, there's been a lot of requests for us to update the way that we store invoices, update our invoice database. So, P, I'm sure you heard loud and clear from the PlubNet earlier this year, kind of the database issues that they were having with LND, which, we largely fixed in 15 and 15.1, right? So this is just like another evolution in that thing is redoing our invoice database. And this actually is like a really interesting and important prerequisite for any sort of Bolt 12 work, where we would want to finish, updating this invoice database to where it's more efficient and preparing it for Bolt 12 development. So that's all, a very long-winded way to say, we're almost ready to start work on it. We're really glad that the rest of the ecosystem has done so while we've been prioritizing Taproot. I think it's something that, we still need to figure out kind of like the when and kind of the staged approach. But I do think, sometime next year, you'll see at least the Bolt 12 invoice format, coming to L&D. But it's just one of those things where, it's not an immediate priority for us. And we're glad that the other implementations are working on it.
That's fantastic, though, that you said sometime next year. I mean, that's great. And just for the audience, when we talk about, Ryan mentioned Bolt 11, Bolt 12, right now in the Lightning Network, one must, if, Q wants to, if we go out and get beers and Q wants to basically pay me for the beer that I bought him. It was a great beer, by the way, the best. I have to generate an invoice, and then he has to scan that invoice, and then he can then send me funds. And Bolt 12, among many other interesting things, aims to kind of make it so that he could send me payments more directly, and it would kind of simplify that process. One thing that you mentioned, Ryan, is you mentioned the spec process, and as I understand it, the major contributors to the various implementations, get together and they work on the Lightning specs. And basically, I may do a terrible job butchering this, but I would describe specs as basically a set of kind of not even instructions, but definitions or protocols or almost the APIs that allow each of the different major Lightning implementations to define the kind of communication protocol between them, so that they can basically say hey, we're implementing this specific feature, and here are the endpoints, the API endpoints, the RPC endpoints, whatever it is, that basically are how you, as a different, totally separate implementation, can implement this yourself, so that we can all kind of intercommunicate. Is that a fair generalization?
Yeah. I think the one nit is it doesn't necessarily get into the API level, but what the specs do provide is okay, once you have your version of this implemented, here are all the test vectors, right? Here are all the tests that you can run against your specific implementation, and your outputs need to match my outputs, right? So it's it's a bunch of words defining how this thing is supposed to work. And then okay, once you've built your thing that you think complies to these words, run the software and get these same outputs.
Yeah, that is a great clarification. Okay, so with, you mentioned Taro, do you feel, or Taro being kind of eventually part of that spec process, do you feel or are you guys trying to build out the spec so that other implementations can in fact support Taro directly?
Oh yeah, for sure. So, I mean, that was, we did this, and again, we did this very intentionally where, Taro is a totally open protocol, right? When we announced in April, we announced on purpose with written out BIPs, right? So this is, because it's on-chain first before Lightning, right? We published, I think there's 6 different BIPs, which is Bitcoin Improvement Proposal, that describe Taro, the protocol, that describe the Merkle-sum sparse Merkle tree data structure that it's using, that describe, the universes, that describe kind of the Taro VM. So we, on purpose, very deliberately, did the extra work to spec the protocol itself, and so that anybody can build and interoperate, can build their own implementation of Taro. So just like how we have L&D, which is an implementation of the Lightning Network, specs, which are defined by the bolts. Last week we announced the Taro D, the Taro daemon, which is an implementation of the Taro BIPs, right? So now the BIPs are still in draft phase. We haven't, they're in Roast Beef's GitHub. They haven't been, formally submitted to the Bitcoin community yet. But it is, very important to us that Taro is seen as something that is, maybe developed by Lightning Labs and, first implemented by Lightning Labs, but it belongs to everybody, right? So I hope we see a Rust version of Taro D ASAP. I hope we see, other implementations. I don't really know if I hope we see one written in C because C, but that's a programmer joke. I hope there's many implementations of the protocol and everybody interoperates with it. Now to the bolts aspect and the Lightning part, right? Like now that we've released the on-chain portion of Taro, kind of the focus is on all of the Lightning stuff for the rest of the year, the Lightning integration for the rest of the year. So we'll see kind of exactly what path that takes in terms of, what additional documentation we're doing, exactly what else do we need beyond just Taproot channels to make that happen. But like fully, again, we're a network effects company. It makes no sense to freeze out any other implementations that want to interoperate with, our protocol and with the assets that are issued on this protocol. So, we will definitely be doing, everything we can to ensure that the other implementations can interoperate, can, route Taro transactions, can support it. I think there are some like outstanding questions again around like the gossip network and sequencing of like how exactly do we deploy this? Do we even want Taro assets to be Taro channels to be routable, or do we want them to be non-routable? There's a bunch of interesting implementation questions that are going to come up as we submit to that process, but definitely the whole everything about Taro is open. Everything about Taro is collaborative, and we're excited for other folks to start building their implementations alongside the VIPs.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think about, as you said, the most important thing here, or one of the most important things, is these network effects, right? Basically empowering developers, empowering users to be able to integrate with these really, really exciting new developments that you guys are building, that CLN is building. And I sometimes wonder or worry about kind of like vendor lock-in and things like that. But it sounds like you guys are just as committed as ever to making sure that this is a technology that is available to, every Lightning implementation, and thus becomes, something that the entire network can benefit from.
Yeah. And so again, and this is one of those things where, because the other implementations made the choice to focus on Bolt 12 this year instead of Taproot, like Taproot is a prerequisite to Taro, right? So, it's one of those things where it's, we want it to happen as soon as possible, of course, but, we can't control their development teams. And so it will be, I think, a little bit for them, one, to implement Taproot, and then two, to implement Taro afterwards. However, like with that being said, I am, the really great thing is we've done all the heavy Taproot lifting already for them, right? And have already implemented that. So their time to deployment should be significantly decreased, just like, our time to deploying Bolt 12 should be as well, with all of these other implementations going through the work. So, that's one of those things that's, every once in a while, the Lightning ecosystem can get like a little snippy with each other, right? That happens every once in a while. But, we always try and remind ourselves, we're all on the same team. We're all trying to bring, Bitcoin to the people that need it, and make it, more performant as a medium of exchange, and build this network together. And that, sometimes teams have differing priorities, and, importantly on Lightning, that's okay. It's not necessarily the case that that's okay on Bitcoin, because this is consensus. We all have to stay, focused on maintaining consensus and all running the same software. But on Lightning, it's okay if we kind of diverge a little bit and prioritize different things. And actually I think that's a huge strength of the ecosystem, that we even can do that. I think it helps bring about, like I said, kind of shorter timelines to deployment, because all the teams working on this stuff are exceedingly competent, and have now worked together for 5 years, right? So know each other pretty well.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Well, we're coming towards the end of our show, and one, I want to thank you so much for joining us. This has been really enjoyable for me. I hope for our audience as well. I'm super excited about the work that you guys are doing. How can people follow you, find you, and also follow the work that Lightning Labs is doing and Lalo is doing on this topic?
Yeah. So number one is, our Twitter account at Lightning. Definitely follow there. That's where we post kind of and retweet kind of all of our announcements and all the news. So definitely follow us at Lightning. I am at Ryan the Gentry, THE, no spaces on Twitter. And I would also recommend subscribing to our newsletter, lightninglabs.substack.com. Of course, our website is lightning.engineering. We are earnestly hiring engineers. So, please look at our Join Us page and, submit an application. There's a ton of work to be done and a ton of new things to build. So, we're always hiring for engineers and for some additional other roles at the team. So definitely do that. And then, of course, got to follow Roast Beef on Twitter as well. So he's at ROASBEEF. Just drops knowledge all the time. Sometimes too much knowledge that we have to try and get him to dial back. But please, my DMs are open. I'm on every messaging app that you can possibly think of, generally with the Ryan the Gentry tag, and looking forward to chatting with the community.
You heard that, ladies. If you match with him on Tinder, make sure you tell him you listen to this interview. Ryan, you're the man. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for teaching me a ton of stuff today that I look forward to continuing to learn. And I just subscribed to your newsletter as well. So looking forward to getting
Fantastic. That. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for having me. This was a blast. And again, developers listening, please go check out the Taro Daemon. We launched it, just last Wednesday. We've already gotten some great feedback, but we launched this alpha testnet only version on purpose because we wanted to get it into your hands. We wanted to get your feedback. We wanted to hear what your priorities are, and we want you to find bugs for us. So please get out there, download the software, run Taro, and we're really excited to bring it to the Lightning Network as the year comes to a close.
All right, my friends. As always, the Bitcoin Amsterdam conference is about to happen. If you do not already have tickets, you can use code BMLive to save 10% off of your ticket. We also have the physical magazine, which, as you've heard me talk about many times, is incredible. No, Q, you are not allowed to do a reading, but it is incredible. And the new issue, the Orange Party issue, is about to drop. Get ready. It's going to be fucking incredible. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then.